Become who you are. Friedrich Nietzsche. Probably one of the most influential, but also one of my favorite philosophers, probably as many other people who have dwelled into philosophy. Episode 5. You know, I've enjoyed this. You know, the past 4 days. Yesterday, loved it. Probably one of my favorite. Well, not probably one of my favorite, but the best episode I think I've made as of now. Maybe it will change after this one. I've really struggled because the past 4 days I had something to go off. I had, you know, my life to go off, so I could talk about something. Whereas today I had too much freedom, and I was like, where do I start? What do I talk about? I know I wanted to start with something very philosophical, as that's the theme of the whole channel, but I didn't want to, you know, go through the basics of religion. Gosh, eventually I'll talk about it, but it won't be, I don't want that to be like the first thing, one of the first few things I talk about. And I still wanted to incorporate myself somehow, you know, with experience, you know, with somewhat of an experience. And I thought, let's relate it to the mental retreat. Become who you are. Now, when I first saw this quote a couple months back, right, when I was going through the toxic cycles of relationships, substance abuse, I thought it meant find myself, you know, within the chaos, find myself again. And probably a lot of people also assumed that from the quote. But as I thought about it, it's not what the quote's about. There isn't something that's magically hidden within you, waiting to be uncovered. You know, there's no magical key to this magical chest that has you in it. It's not true. Nietzsche himself didn't mean for it to be, you know, discovery, something that you have to find, but rather something you have to be responsible for. To become who you are means the self is not given. You know, it's shaped, it's maintained, and it continuously forms. The self is always developing. You can't catch it. You can't catch it in a still picture and be like, okay, this is me now. No. It's going to continue to develop. It's like trying to predict your own thought, your next thought. You can't, because the prediction of your next thought is the thought you're making about the prediction of the thought. You're catching your own tail. You know, trying to find yourself, you just can't do it. Instead of trying to run towards it, stop. All you have to do is stop and just think for once and feel, experience for once, instead of being caught in the rush. Just stop running. And that's what I did. And wow, it almost like, not like completely changed me as a person, but it really made me think. You know, I wasn't thinking about my thoughts, I was observing them at this point. And I was like, wow. 4 subtopics today. We'll start off with the first one. You aren't your personality, but rather you are your patterns. In the modern day and age, we treat personality like it's an identity, you know, something you identify as. Introverted, extroverted, confident, anxious, avoidant. I'm not gonna let that one go, by the way. That's gonna be a running joke for this until I feel it's deemed fit to not be a joke anymore. So yeah, avoidance, another identity. But personality is far more descriptive than that. It's far more detailed than just something casual like a label of extroversion or introversion. It doesn't describe who you are in motion. It shouldn't describe who you are in motion. It should describe your tendencies, your patterns. Yeah, I think that's what I was going to go for. So anyway, what defines you are your patterns. How, your pattern recognition. Going back to the whole thing of pattern recognition and your brain simply trying to make its life easier, or your life easier. Depends which way you look at it. Things like how you respond under pressure. This point is one of my favorite points. What you repeat when no one's looking, when no one's watching what you're doing, the things you repeat, the toxic habits you repeat, that's you. It's not some alter ego or an evil power, a sin. It's you. You're consciously doing that. It's a pattern that you're making. It's not an identity you've given it. No, it's you. You're allowing these patterns to happen. The things that you default to when things become uncomfortable. That's a big one. I think I will definitely go with that. That's something that I would relate to. I think one of the easiest things that a lot of people will do is listen to sad or melancholy music almost, because that's easier. It's easier to just be sad and not think about it and just be sad. Simply not think about it, not process it, just be sad, and then the Spotify shuffle gives you a happy song, now you're magically happy and you're forgetting that you're sad. Rather than sitting with the problem, you're just running away from it. Because you're doing the default, you're doing the thing that's easier, rather than the facing the hard truth. Another philosopher that I love, Aristotle, he said, "We are what we repeat." I think that's how the quote goes. Something along the lines of, we are what we repeatedly do. Something along the lines of that. That's not quote for quote, but, and also Stoics, they agree with that. We are what we repeat. It's simply true. And I wouldn't say, your character isn't what you claim that you value. It's the things that you enact. It's the things that you do. That's your character. If you continuously, hurt people to make yourself feel better, that's your character. If you continuously drink because your life is so boring on a Tuesday night, that's your character. If you, I don't know, but you get the point. We'll go into a psychological perspective into this. That makes sense. The brain. Thank you, yes. And the thought was right there, and I caught it just in time. The brain. It wants patterns. As I've said, it wants repeated behaviors. It finds comfort in the repeated behaviors that it does. Because it's easier to just let the neural pathways that have already been made send the impulses through, rather than making a brand new neural connection between the neurons. Because it's a lot easier to just go through the path that you've made, rather than find a new path that you don't know where it's going to take you. It's the truth. The brain and going on a walk are very similar. You're going to go down the path that you've been multiple times because you know what's at the end of it. Same thing with the brain. You're going to follow through with that same pattern because you know what's at the end of it. It's the comfort, because you'd rather have comfort than discomfort. then and then, the more you walk through that path, the more that path's going to become ingrained, Let's say it's a grassy path. The more you walk through that path, the more ground's going to show, the less grass is going to show. And same thing with neural pathways. The more you'll go through them, the stronger those pathways get through habit. And that kind of puts me on the point of identity isn't a belief. It's not something that you can just believe in. It's simply a biological pattern. It's the truth. Your identity isn't something that you believe in, because it's not. It's your brain overriding the psychological part of it. The biological part of you is being overridden by that psychological part. Now, it may seem it may seem like I'm yapping and I'm talking nonsense, but stick with it, please. And this kind of applied to me at the time. If you want to change, you can't change the labels that you've given yourself. Narcissism, egotistical. You have to change the repetition. You have to break the cycle. You have to take the other path. You have to take the unknown. Because at the end of the day, the unknown is the other path. And yes, you don't know where it will lead to, but it will lead to somewhere. It won't be a dead end. You're not repeating that behavior anymore, and then that just strengthens your brain even more. If it's the truth, going down that path again and again and again, your brain will just be like, yep, here we go, again and again. And the same thing with taking an action, for example, smoking. Yep, cool, I know how this is going to end. But what if you went down the other path? What if you didn't smoke that day? Where would it take you? You don't know. But you find it discomforting because you don't know the unknown. Hence why it's the unknown. It's the same thing with the dark. We're biologically wired to be scared of the dark, not because it's dark, but rather we don't know what's behind the dark. We don't know if there's anything there. We're scared of the unknown. That's what humans are scared of, or any animal for that matter. We're scared of the unknown. We're scared of not being able to predict the next move that we make. And that brings me onto my favorite point. Well, sorry, the second subtopic. Why confidence is confused. Yes, why confidence is confused with ego and almost seen as the same thing. But it's not. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. I always thought me being confident was my ego. I'm going to stroll around, make eye contact with everyone. Oh, that's me being confident. No, that's me being egotistical. Me thinking about it. No. The ego isn't a strength. It's not something that's, a strong thing. Absolutely not. It's very weak. But it's a defense. It's something that you use to defend yourself. And when the ego feels... Not when the ego feels, sorry. The ego forms when the self feels threatened. Threatened by the unknown almost. Kind of, more or less. I'm getting in the flow state of things. It's been a long day. It compensates for things. It performs. It compares. You could go into the sins, 7 deadly sins. But it will compensate for things to make you feel better. Let's say you do something, something that's fun, like, awkward or embarrassing. Your mind will compensate for that and be like, it'll make fun of the other person in your head eventually. it will perform. My ego performs. If I'm in the gym and I've got, whatever it be, I'm going to perform more. Or if I know I'm being watched, I'm going to perform a different way to when I know I'm not being watched. And the worst part of it all, it will compare. It will subconsciously even. You'll compare yourself to a friend, and you won't even realize you're comparing yourself to them. It's just a subconscious thing, because it's a defense. They have something that you want, and now you want it too. You're comparing, but then you'll be like, oh, they have this, but I have that. They have a relationship, but I have peace. Or I have a relationship, but they have peace. It goes both ways. And I would say, this is from my experience and how I feel because of my ego. The louder the ego, not bigger the ego. The louder the ego, the more fragile the foundation of that ego is. I mean, I'm living proof. My ego was one of the loudest egos. Still more or less is, but it was built on a very fragile foundation, as said in episode 1. And it just comes to show that I was compensating for something that I had felt. I was trying to be this big person because deep down I was the smallest person. Deep down I felt insignificant. I felt useless, a thrown away toy, you could say. So to compensate for that, I became the biggest person to everyone else, became the loudest, because it was easier to do that than think that I'm still insignificant and the fragile little person I was after I'd left Poland. Stoicism. Again, another very philosophical, famous term that seems to have been very much TikTokified that I've seen throughout the reposts, and I feel like the representation it gives is awful. I'm not going to go into Stoicism as a whole, because that is a whole other video I want to touch on, because there's so much to do with that. But what I would say is that Stoicism, similar to how Buddhists view it, the ego comes from attachment to external factors. Similar to how Buddhists view attachment as, the thing that causes all of us pain. Well, I'll go for 4 quite easy external things that I think I could talk about. Number 1, approval. The ego seeks approval. Without approval, the ego will have nothing, because it won't. Living proof. If I'm in school and I make a joke or I make a comment about something, and if I don't get a laugh or a reaction out of it, the ego suffers. It doesn't get the approval it needs. It will get angry, it will get frustrated. I've seen it happen. Like, oh, I'm getting ignored. Oh, I don't like it. Another external, status. The ego thrives in status. The more people know you, the louder the ego. But the more people that know you, the less of you are, because the things that make you are just out there. Because you're sharing, because your ego needs the status. And how does it get the status? It tells people things, because it compensates for the silence. A very egotistical person will not be able to sit in silence with another person. Well, not a real life example, I could sit in awkward silence with someone for hours upon hours if I had to, and I wouldn't feel awkward. And obviously, in my head I'd be like, so when are you going to speak? Still egotistical, but I'm not going to break first, unless... No, I don't think there's ever been a time that if there is an awkward silence, I won't break first. Now, but for example, relationship number 3, I broke first. again, to compensate for the ego, because I wanted to be the bigger I wanted to be the bigger person. So my ego was like, okay, let's do it. Now I'm the bigger person. But my ego became insignificant. It became smaller to the point where I was almost nothing. And then external number 3, control. Oh God. Now this one I can definitely talk for real life. I'm living proof of it. Why? I've been given the label of natural leader, natural group leader, or just natural leader in general, right? Again, this is not the ego speaking. I have been told by people, including teachers as well, natural born leader. And that's not because I have some sort of magical skill or something. No. It's the ego. My ego seeks control. If I'm in a group, let's say 4 people, in like science, for example, right? This is maybe year 12. I'm in a group of 4 people, and we're all just sat there. All of us are in silence now. We've been given a task. Do something, I can't remember, maybe make a picture or something like that. Do research. We're all just sat there. I'm reading my notes. I have not processed it yet. I'm still going back over the content that I just learned in biology. Someone, literally the person next to me goes, right, Casper, what's the plan? And I go, and I think to myself, I haven't even spoken yet. I haven't even processed what's going on, and you're asking me what's going on. Like, what's the plan? And I'm just thinking to myself, why me? And I'd realized I had set this like standard for myself that I need control. Because if I'm not in control, then everything's wrong. If I'm not in control, then something's going to go wrong because it's not my way, and my way is always the right way, right? The ego seeks control. It's truth. And if the ego... How I know my ego seeks control so much is, let's say I join a new group, right? It's happened once. I have living proof of it. I joined this group once. Names will be unnamed, as always. I joined this group once, and there was the natural group leader, right? And what I did is I got so close to the group leader that I influenced the group leader, and it was always like I was the group leader's leader. And then whatever I said to the group leader, everyone else would follow. So meaning, I didn't have to influence 4 people. I only had to influence 1, because if I had taken control of the shepherd, the sheep are going to follow the shepherd. Whereas taking control of the shepherd and the sheep is a lot harder. Dark, I know, twisted as well, but at the end of the day, I was in control. And they didn't even realize it, because they were so focused on the leader's decisions that they didn't even know that I was the one influencing the decisions. And I could go out there right now and do the same exact thing. Find a new group, find the leader, not necessarily become the leader, find the leader, get really close with the leader, then more than the other sheep have. And now I'm subconsciously the new group leader without the supposedly group leader not knowing. And then the final, my mind blanked. The final external is validation. Similar to approval, I'd say pretty much the same thing, but if the ego isn't validated, if it isn't given what it wants, it doesn't like it. It really doesn't like it. And then that's when the big defense crumbles, because it's not given what it needs. And that's when you start overthinking. That's when the ego just crumbles, and you're just like, oh no, I'm now the insignificant person I was before I built the ego as a defense. And when, yes, again, out of all 4 of these externals or any other external thing, if the ego feels threatened by any of these, it will react in the worst way possible. That's how Stoics viewed it. Nietzsche, on the other hand, was far, far more harsher. he saw it as a weakness that almost masquerades power. Yes, he did. He saw it as a weakness masqueraded by power. He saw it as almost resentment disguised as dominance. I almost forgot the other argument of the ego. Confidence. Sorry. Confidence isn't loud. It's not being the loudest person in the room. It's more about being quiet, being in tune. Confidence doesn't need to prove anything. You know, not always, but usually the most confident person is the quietest in an argument, because they don't have to prove anything to anyone. They've made up their mind in their head. They've proven themselves. That's the only person they have to prove. And at that point, you've beat the argument before you've even said a word. You know, you've won it before you've said a word to the other person arguing with you. Because it doesn't need approval. It doesn't collapse under that criticism. You know, it could be critiqued. The confidence could be critiqued in any way possible. But the thing is, confidence is already made up in your head. It was already made up at the start of the argument, right? Meaning, it can't be. You know, someone could critique you in the most way possible, but if you're confident with it and you've made up your mind, it's not a fragile foundation at all. It's a really strong foundation. And it doesn't require to be superior. It doesn't require to be the control freak, or just being in control. You know, I'm talking about all of this like it's the easiest thing to do, but it's not, because being in control usually comes from a toxic friendship or toxic friendship group, because it's such a hard way to explain it. We're just gonna carry on, because yeah, I'm really tired. We'll finish off with confidence. Confidence, again, that's probably the best way. It comes from self-trust. If you trust yourself, rather than creating a self-image of yourself, you're going to be a lot more confident, because you trust yourself enough to not need approval, validation. What's the other one? Control. It doesn't need those things. It doesn't need that fuel. I would say the ego protects the self you're afraid to lose. Because you don't want to lose yourself. You don't want to lose that habit that you've made. You want to keep that habit. So the ego will coincide with the brain, and it will do anything it can to prevent you losing. Whereas I feel confidence trusts the self that you've already built. Yeah, I like that. Subtopic 3. We're kind of going into one of my favorite philosophical debates or dilemmas, the ship of Theseus or the heap dilemma, right? Ship of Theseus, it's a ship, right? And it's a really broken ship. The question is, how much of that ship would you have to take away for that ship to not be the ship of Theseus? How many parts would I have to replace of the ship of Theseus for it to not be the ship of Theseus? Would it always be the ship of Theseus because of the label it's being given? Or is it the parts that make it the ship of Theseus? Similar to a heap, right, of sand. How much sand grains would I have to take from the heap until it doesn't become a heap? But what's defined as a heap? the question. The label of the heap, it could be it could be a grain of sand on top of the other grain of sand. Is that defined as a heap? And identity is a very similar thing. Trauma. That's what we're talking about in subtopic 3. Trauma and identity. Hypothetical. If I removed every single traumatic thing from your life, who would you be? Who would you be? And if that question made you uncomfortable, it's a good thing. Because trauma almost becomes an organizing force. It comes as an organizing force. It shapes you. It shapes boundaries, expectations, attachment styles. It's the only thing I've got actually written for it shapes. It shapes attachment styles. I really love attachment styles, as you can see, and emotional reactions. We'll break all 4 down. Boundaries. Trauma will shape your boundaries, you know. Say, very evident with me. Not as much now, but back then, I would be a really enclosed person, I feel, you know. It would be a very much enclosed thing. Trauma shapes boundaries. Very evident with me, of course, as we've seen. Maybe not in the stereotypical way that I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to speak to anyone. But rather, the boundaries I set for myself is, I'm now this person. You know, this person that I've made up in my head. That's not real me. But that's the boundary I've set because I couldn't let other people know the trauma. So, the trauma built that boundary for 3 years nearly. And that's who I was. This fictional person in my head. That's the boundaries that the trauma had set. I wouldn't go past. As soon as relationship number 2 got meaningful, that was it. As soon as I felt that I could tell them about it, no. The boundary was no. I couldn't tell anyone. It seemed like it was there. Like the trauma said, no, you can't tell anyone this because the boundary we set. But there was no boundary set. There was no definitive line that I was nearing to cross. Expectations. Trauma really sets your expectations high or low. Relationships will usually be the traumatic thing that set expectations. Not always. It could be other things, family, whatever. But usually it's going to be relationships, platonic, you know, romantic. Let's say you're with someone and they do... I'm going to give a personal example, but I feel like I've terrorized the people from my past enough. Actually, no. Podcast is about me. It's in the name. So, expectations. From relationship number 2, I had an expectation of what a relationship should be. And when relationship 3 came along, the expectations kind of shifted. Still were more or less the same from relationship 2, because how relationship 2 left is how I expected you know, what the bad things were in relationship 2 was the expectations I had of number 3 not doing. And as soon as number 3 broke those expectations of not repeating number 2, I was like, ooh. And that was because of a trauma response. Because what I had gone through with number 2 was the same here, and now the expectations crumbled. Attachment styles. I don't think I have to talk about that one. I think I've talked how trauma shaped that one yesterday and the day before. Emotional reactions. I feel like that's a really big umbrella term, but trauma will shape your emotional reactions. You know, I don't know what's the best example, but it's true. I'm not going to give you an example. I don't feel like it. And over time, it's like now you're surviving. So now you're making survival strategies that start to feel like your personality. For example, hypervigilance will feel like awareness. Emotional withdrawal will feel like independence. Wow. Let's think about that one for a sec. Emotional withdrawal will feel like independence. Not something that I've experienced, but something that I've seen happen. Relationship number 3. Gosh, I feel like I'm terrorizing. I feel like I'm just not letting it go. But this is how I'm going to let it go, by speaking about it, right? There's no other way to let things go. Yeah, trauma. Anyway. If you emotionally withdraw from something and you've conditioned yourself, I'm taking myself out of that emotionally, I'm independent, I don't need it, I don't need to feel this emotional response. I experienced that firsthand. I saw that. I'm like, and at the time, I didn't know it, right? I was still very much closed behind my own doors. But looking back on it, not being blinded by, the neurotransmitters that gave my brain oxytocin and dopamine. Looking back on it, it really shows, them pulling away made them think that they were independent. Where, again, you're in a relationship. You're not independent anymore. You are with someone. Yes, you should still be independent, but you're with them. You've got to let them know. You can't just withdraw your emotions, and it just doesn't work. And control feels like stability, right? This one, I can say that. If I control everything, it's going to be stable because I'm controlling it. But it's not the truth. Because once I had felt not in control, and the one time I didn't feel in control of my own life was when the one time that I had felt unstable was when I wasn't in control of my life. That's when the most unstable part of me was there, because simply for those 3 nights I wasn't in control of my life. And that made me need the control of my own life. Because yes, I feel like I was going to say something else of others' life, but not others' life, others' lives, but my own life. If I had control of my own life now, I'd be stable. I wouldn't get into that same position again, because I have the control, meaning then I become a stable individual. I have that stability. Trauma. First hand, giving you an example. And I feel like trauma will change you. But that isn't the part that's the scary, that part is unavoidable. You can't do anything about it. The dangerous part is when it stops being something you carry and it becomes being the thing you are. As soon as you let trauma become your identity, that's the scary part. Sorry, I've lost my notes. Again, going back to it, as soon as you let trauma become, I'm juxtaposing myself, I know, but I feel like, when am I not juxtaposing myself? That's a good question. When am I not juxtaposing myself? Right. Stoicism, I feel like, makes the best distinction here, right? The event is external. Your response is the internal part. You can't change what's happened. You can't change what happened at that moment. But you are responsible for how you react and how it lives inside of you, how that trauma lives inside of you. The trauma happened. You can't go back and change it. But what you can do is prevent you responding to it in a negative way. Preparing yourself to respond in the best way possible. Nietzsche would go further and say suffering either deepens you or it deforms you. If pain becomes identity, that growth stops. If pain is transformed into something else, into a different state of matter, meaning emerges. It's giving significance, not to the trauma that's developed, but the pain from the trauma and how that is transformed into something else. Healing won't magically erase the depth of the trauma. I would say it never has. No matter how much healing I would have done. It will go on for years. The trauma's there. It cut the wound deep. But the last thing I'm going to focus on is how deep that wound is. What I'm going to focus on is how to cover that wound and how to, get the smoothest recovery from that wound. It almost, the healing almost removes the threat. It removes the threat from the trauma. Sorry, that was quite deep. It's, when I'm speaking to myself, obviously I'm hitting the camera, I'm looking at myself, meaning it's literally as if I'm talking to myself, which it's a lot different when it's in their head compared to when it's me looking at me. So, yeah, sorry, there was a big pause there. That one touched me. Anyway, wrap up trauma and identity, and I feel like that's why trauma can almost be that's why healing can be seen as an identity loss, because you've based your identity on this trauma, and now that you're trying to heal from it, it's like, but that's not the same me. That isn't, it's so hard to perceive it as it not being you, because you're so ingrained, your personality, you as a person is so ingrained from that trauma that healing from it almost feels like you're erasing yourself. And that's an uncomfortable feeling. And I feel like this is because defense has been mistaken for the self. Subtopic 4. The self isn't found. You're not magically going to find yourself one day. It's something that you have to maintain. Same thing goes for, you're not going to magically lose yourself one day. You're not going to wake up one day and be like, oh wow, I lost myself. Yeah. By the time you realize you've lost yourself, it's drifted away. By the time you realize, because, let's say you're stuck on an island and you see a boat, right? The boat that you're here, you'll go to sleep, you'll wake up, the boat will seem like it's still there, and then eventually, the boat's still there. So you're just not going to check up on it. And then next time you check up on it, it's perceived as still close, but it's further away. And you're like, it's only moved a little bit. And then you stop checking up on it for like a week. And now the boat's further away, but then again, you don't seem to realize it. You do realize it's far, but you've forgotten how close it was. So you're just like, it's just gotten a little further again. A month now goes by. The ship is out, your boat is out of sight. Almost out of sight, and you're like, and now it's drifted. Could be for, a number of reasons. You could have been distracted by the coconuts on the island or the food that's on the island, but you forgot about the one way off the island. Similarly to how people will lose themselves. They don't realize they lose themselves because of other things that have distracted them from it. Things that cause them to drift away from the self that they haven't maintained. God. Oh, again, try do 4 examples of how things can drift, how the self can drift away. Neglected habits. I think that's a big one. It's true with me. I could go through many different examples. I could go through the gym. You know, if I neglect the gym as a habit, if I don't go for 2 days in a row, I'm neglecting it. It doesn't seem like it's a lot, but then the next week I'll skip 3 days. The week after that, I'll skip 4 days. And at that point, I'm not maintaining the self that I am. I'm drifting away from it. Boundaries. Boundaries. Yeah. Let's say you've set boundaries with your partner about a certain thing, I don't know, going through the phone, right? Okay, cool. You go through the phone once. Oh, it's a minor thing, they didn't even notice. You go through it twice. You go through it thrice. 3 times. I love thrice. You go through it thrice. And now you're going through their phone every day. You know, you're obsessing over what's going on, what they're reposting, who they're messaging. You've lost yourself. You've lost the self that you promised the other person. You've not maintained it. You've not lost it, you've not maintained it. What else? As we're on the topic of relationships. Standards. Let's say you're single and you say to yourself, I'm not going to get with someone who does X and Y. Okay? You're talking to this new person. They exhibit X and Y, but you're just like, yeah, but I made that promise to myself a long time ago. I set that standard so long ago. I'm such a different person now. No. You're not a different person now. You're a different person as soon as you accept their standards. The lowered standards that you've set yourself. As soon as it's not maintained, again, you've not maintained yourself. You are no longer the same self. I can't think of a fourth one. I'm going to give you them 3. I think them 3 are deep enough for how, examples of how things can drift apart and how you can, not how you can lose yourself, how you can not maintain yourself. Stoics believe that the self is maintained through discipline. Through things like attention. If you give yourself attention, if you maintain the attention to give only to yourself, the full attention that you deserve, you will maintain the self. Choice. Let yourself have choices. Let yourself be able to choose things. Don't limit yourself to one path. Be able to choose choices. Be able to choose choices. Nice. Be able to give yourself the opportunities. Don't become less of a self because of it. Restraint. A big one. Restrain yourself sometimes. Train the self. Maintain the self to not give that instant gratitude, that instant dopamine hit. Give it a minute. Wait until you've done this, then go to get that dopamine hit. And my favorite one, consistency. That's the only way you can preserve yourself and maintain yourself. If you're consistent with yourself. As soon as you lose that consistency, you've stopped maintaining yourself. Identity isn't introspection, alone. I would say I've been quite introspective the past 4 days, 5 now as well. But that alone isn't my identity. It's that daily maintenance of me confronting myself with the problems, acknowledging the problems, that I've done the bad. And that's that. Nietzsche agreed with the Stoics, but he added responsibility to that. Hold yourself responsible for your actions. Hold yourself responsible for the bad thing you've done. Become comfortable with becoming uncomfortable. It's probably the best thing. Learn to become uncomfortable. As they say, as a good sailor was never trained in smooth seas. It's the truth. Learn to become uncomfortable. It's the only way you're going to thrive. And then eventually, being uncomfortable will just be a natural thing, and that will become the new comfort, almost. Very paradoxical, but what isn't? And I feel like you aren't responsible for who you are. Like right now, the person you are, you're not responsible for that. What you should be held responsible for is who you're going to become. In a year, 2 years, 10 years, however long, you should hold yourself responsible for who you are going to become. Because at the end of the day, you can't change what happened yesterday or today. It's happened. But you can prepare yourself for what's going to happen tomorrow. And to finish up on maintenance, neglect is very much a choice. And drift is still very much a direction. The self doesn't just magically disappear. The ship magically won't disappear. It will slowly drift away. It will slowly get further and further. And the same thing with the self. It will slowly get further and further, or become less and less, till it erodes, and now you have nothing. You don't even know where to start to pick yourself up again. I was in that very much position, because I had let the ship go because I was so focused on other things outside the self, like the coconuts on the island, or the food on the island, or the warm water, or whatever it would have been, the views from the mountain on the hill on the island. But I forgot about the ship. I forgot my way out off the island. The island is very much the discomfort you're in. And you need to be face to face with your identity. Maintain that identity. Keep that ship by the shore, because if you don't, it will drift away. And as soon as it drifts away, there's no way of getting off the island. And if you do get off the island, you have to swim. And that's a rough swim you have to make to maybe even catch up to the boat. And if you don't, you're now stranded in the middle of the ocean. You now don't have the discomfort of the island. You don't have the comfort of the ship. You have nothing. What do you do then? Let's finish off with, I was going to say only 4 subtopics, but since I've mentioned Nietzsche and Stoicism so much, let's finish off on a little Stoicism and Nietzsche kind of put together. And how I feel Stoicism and Nietzsche kind of influenced me. Oh, pardon me. Stoicism gives us structure. It gave me structure. It gave me the emotional regulation. It gave me the acceptance of reality, and it gave me internal stability, because I saw that I have to accept what's happened. I can't change what's happened, but what I can change is how I'm going to react the next time that same thing happens. And that gave me the stability, because I had learned how to react to things. So now I'm going to be a lot more stable when it comes to that thing happening again. and I can regulate those emotions because I had once experienced it, and if it comes at me again, even stronger, I know somewhat how to respond to it. Nietzsche gives us vitality. He gives us self-creation, growth through challenge. Yeah, kind of. And almost the rejection of being stagnant. I feel like Stoicism prevents that collapse, whereas Nietzsche prevents the comfort from becoming the decay. Yeah. I was thinking if those are the right words, but yeah, those are very much the right words. And I feel like together, you can maintain order, but you can also create meaning. I just got a real sense of deja vu. Okay, I'm back from the deja vu thing. Identity needs stability, and it needs becoming. It's the best. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Identity requires both of them. So I'm looking at my green tea, and there's none left, and I'm really sad about that. Stability. How am I going to react to this? Next time, I'm going to make my green tea halfway throughout the episode. I had to really think about the closing reflections, It took me a while. It took me a pee break. And I've still not got much. Because, with the past 4 episodes, I had a past to relate to. So I could, give a closing reflection. Let's end it on a positive note. You aren't your labels. You aren't the labels that you or other people have given you. You are not your personality profile. You're not your personality. And you're definitely not your trauma. Going back cyclical back to episode 1, you aren't your past experiences. But you are rather what you repeat under pressure. No, not necessarily what you repeat, but what you choose to repeat. That's what you are. The things you choose to repeat under pressure. And going back, the self is something it's not something you can find. It's not something that there's a physical object to it. You can't find it. It has to be something you practice. It has to be something you protect. And it has to be something you maintain. And how I opened it. Become who you are. But not by searching, but by taking responsibility for what you continue to become.